समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
The sinking of the Iranian frigate IRIS Dena off the coast of Sri Lanka, say about 40 nautical miles or about 70 kilometers from the coast of Sri Lanka, away from Sri Lankan territorial waters, but within Sri Lankan exclusive economic zone and its maritime zone of operations also, because oceans are divided like that. Countries have their own maritime zones of operations. This was within Sri Lanka's maritime zone of operations, far away from India, almost 450 kilometers away from India, from the Indian coast. That sinking has taken place, that we all know. This was hit by a torpedo fired by the American Virginia class SSN. SSN is a nuclear powered submarine, not nuclear weapon, a nuclear powered submarine. That picture we have seen. US Department of Defense has released that picture as well. You are smart, so you will catch me at some point calling it Department of Defense. They now call it, Trump administration calls it Department of War. However, I am forced by memory and habit to use Department of Defense. I suspect to which it will be restored 2.5 years or 3 years from now. This is a very formidable torpedo, first put into use in 1972. Has gone through many improvements, many iterations. This is a monster of a torpedo with about 1.67 tons of weight and 293 kilos of warhead. Very difficult that any ship of this size, although Dena was not a small ship, 95 meters long, 1500 tons. And I wouldn't think any ship of this kind of size, or maybe even a larger one, hit by a torpedo at close range like this, would survive. This one sank, as the submarine's captain said, or the US Department of Defense said, within 2 minutes. From the ship, 84 bodies have been recovered by the Sri Lankans. 64 are still missing. 32 have been rescued. Those are the facts we know. Indian Navy, however, issued a statement on the 5th March evening, about say 36 hours after the event, that as soon as they became aware of the distress signal received by the Sri Lankans, they dispatched a PATI to the site to look for survivors and to see the situation. And also a ship was diverted, a Navy ship was diverted there. By 4 p.m. on the 4th, the Indian Navy ship was also there. So it's not as if the Indian Navy did not reach out, except that it wasn't there with the ship. Except that on the seas, things don't move as fast as they do in the air. Now, this is wartime. In wartime, stuff happens. So that is besides the point, because many Iranian vessels have been sunk by the Americans and Israelis over the past 4 days. In fact, as we speak now, the US Pentagon claims that the Iranian Navy does not survive in the Persian Gulf. In fact, they've released pictures, they've released charts, they've released satellite images to prove that no Iranian Navy survives in the Persian Gulf. That's besides the point, because a fight is going on. However, the sinking of the Dena so close to India, so close to Sri Lanka, in what is called the Indian Ocean after all, that has raised many questions. And I will list those questions for you. And as we go along, I will try and answer those, while also telling you more about the ship and the circumstances in which it got here, also the strength of the Iranian Navy. So what are the questions that are raised? Number one, the obvious question: why was this ship here? The ship was here because it had come at the call, at the invitation of the Indian Navy to attend the International Fleet Review inspected by the President of India. These are ceremonial things that the navies do. The navies like their ceremony much more than armies and air forces, and they collect ships from all friendly navies. In this case, ships came from 74 navies. Americans had also initially planned or promised to send an Arleigh Burke class destroyer, but at the last moment they cancelled it. They did not come. That might have been a signal, maybe also for the Iranians and the rest, that something was afoot. However, the American delegation was there in Vizag. That's where President Draupadi Murmu inspected this collection of naval forces or naval assets or naval ships, vessels from all over the world, all friendly countries, including Iran. Now, after this, everybody went home. These sailors also marched in the streets of Vizag. That's all part of the naval razzmatazz or ceremony. While all of them were going home, this one going home was waylaid by an American submarine, this Virginia class, and it was then struck and drowned. So the question is, the first question is, because it had come to India at the invitation of the Indian Navy for a ceremonial reason in which he participated in the event and was going back, does India feel responsible or should India be held accountable for what happened to it? That's number one. Number two, if it was going back like this, everybody knew that it was going back, it was no secret, such a ship cannot hide. Would India have done something, or could India have done something to protect it, maybe by telling the Americans that, look, your war has started, this ship had come here on goodwill, it's going back, it's probably not even fully armed because you are not allowed to carry weapons when you come for these ceremonial voyages. So please give it safe conduct or whatever. Number three, if at all India wanted to do something, what could they have done? Could India have said that, look, war has broken out in the Gulf region. We know it's a bit far away, but this is open seas now. These are high seas. We don't control these seas. Anything beyond 200 nautical miles from our shores, that is our exclusive economic zone. In fact, anything beyond our territorial waters, everybody has open season, but this is even beyond our EEZ. So we don't have any role. The Chinese can be there, the Americans can be there, the Pakistanis can be there, as long as they are not being hostile to us and they are not our foes or likely foes, we don't have any role to play. Could India then have said that, all right, we will escort you? Now the question is, if Indian Navy said we will escort you, did Indian Navy have the wherewithal then to protect it from an American submarine? Would Indian Navy then go to war with an American submarine? Those are questions. I'm not answering them. I'm just raising the questions that have now come up. Next, even if the Indian Navy decided to escort it at strength, how far would they escort it and in which direction? Because if the ship tried to go home, that is to Iran, the closer it got to the Persian Gulf and the deeper it went into the Arabian Sea, the more exposed it would be to American attacks, because this would then be in the full war zone. The closer it will get to home, the closer it will get to the war zone. So could India then have given refuge to this ship? I don't know. Did the ship ask for safe harbor or refuge? We don't know. If it did and was granted some kind of safe harbor in India, although there are some reports that it was going to refuel in Kochi. But if it was expecting safe harbor, that it's a bit strange that it was sailing so far down south. It could have hugged the coastline of Sri Lanka, stayed close to its territorial waters, then come closer to Indian territorial waters. This was quite a bit far out. So I don't know what exactly was happening, but these questions arise. The common answer to all of this, the government has not spoken, they've not said anything, although today our foreign minister Jai Shankar and Iran's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi had a phone conversation, and also our foreign secretary visited the Iranian embassy in Delhi and signed the condolence book for Ayatollah Khamenei. Under any circumstances, whatever the quality of our politics, however healthy or unhealthy our debate, the government of the day would have faced questions from the opposition over the sinking of the IRIS Dena, over the argument that this was your guest and it's been sunk on its way back by our friend. Aren't you accountable? Aren't you raising questions? Stuff like that. One of the things said there also is that when we were in power, in this case when the Congress was in power, we really asserted our sovereignty and our sovereign interest to such an extent that Sri Lanka wanted to allow a Voice of America transmitter or a relay station on its coast, in this case not far from Trincomalee, but we blocked it. We blocked it because we would not permit any such thing, and even the mighty Americans were not able to do it. The fact is, this is not true. A transmission center did come up. It was a Voice of America center. Later, a Deutsche Welle German center also came up. India protested. Mrs. Gandhi was furious earlier when this plan was made out. Rajiv Gandhi was also angry. And this was, in fact, seen as one of the reasons or one of the provocations that India used to justify its support and sponsorship for LTT and many other such Tamil separatist organizations, which ultimately consumed the life of Rajiv Gandhi. Nearly 1250 IPKF soldiers, wounded so many, caused so much damage through terrorism and created such a mayhem with terrorism in Sri Lanka and also in India. So once again, this transmission center was not blocked. It was set up. I was on the other side of the story. I've been to Trincomalee in those days, seen the walls of this transmission center from outside. It was certainly a thorn in India's side. And India, under Congress governments, Indira Gandhi and Rajiv Gandhi were complaining bitterly about it. At the same time, they were not able to stop this. Those days, Sri Lanka had a very different politics. Sri Lankan armed forces, for example, were getting training from the Israelis. They were also employing some foreign pilots for combat missions. That was a different universe and a different subcontinent. The government has not spoken about this, but lots of people who either feel sympathetic to the government or who represent the establishment thinking, or people who in any case believe that once the ship left Vizag, the ship was responsible for its own safety once it was in international waters. They argue that, look, the ship left, it's like you invite somebody for dinner, you have a nice time at dinner, the guy leaves, you say goodbyes to the guy when he leaves. On the way, the guy is waylaid and killed by robbers, right? Then are you going to be held responsible for that? The quick answer is no. However, there is a caveat. If the robbers were people who were your friends, and robbers were not just, and these were not just your friends, but also your partners, as the Americans are, say, in the Quad arrangement, which unfortunately Trump doesn't seem to take that seriously, then would you have some gila shikwa, some complaint, some regret with the Americans that, look, these are people we hosted, they were going home, you are our friends, we worked together in Indian Ocean, should you have really hit them? So that question will remain, but that's a moral question. And in warfare, the first thing that dies is morality. Then the next question comes up. The next question comes up, this submarine hit this ship and sailors were drowning. Should it have stayed back to help the sailors or rescue the sailors? And examples are then brought in from 1942, etc., when some similar things happened in Second World War. Remember, however, that in the Second World War, more than 2,000, that's the correct number, more than 2,000 ships were sunk by submarines or U-boats, as the Germans called them. It was a carnage of ships because nobody quite knew how to deal with this underwater menace. Sonars were not very well developed at that point of time, so submarines were almost impossible to find. They're tough enough to find even now. Since the Second World War, submarine to ship strikes have been very few. How few? Only 4 so far, of which one was our own INS Khukri in 1971, and I will tell you a little bit more about it as we go along towards the end of this episode, because that becomes relevant now. The Khukri was sunk on 9th December 1971. General Belgrano, the big Argentinian cruiser, obsolete already totally, had more than 1,000 people on board. The Royal Navy sank it with a submarine strike, torpedo strike, at a time when it was considered to be no threat to them. And that to date remains an ethical question around the Falklands War, because that happened in the Falklands War. 323 died in that case, 772 were rescued. That date was May 2, 1982. The Khukri was sunk on December 9 in the evening by PNS Hongor, a Daphne class, a new Daphne class, French-made Daphne class submarine of Pakistan Navy. 18 officers and 176 other ranks. 61 other ranks and 6 officers were rescued. This happened 40 nautical miles. 1 nautical miles is very simple, 1.852. You can just say a little less than twice in kilometers. 1.852 kilometers is 1 nautical miles. You can say generally about 70 kilometers off the coast of Diu. This ship was sunk, INS Khukri was sunk, and 186 and 18 officers plus 176 others sank. When this happened, PNS Hangor, the Pakistani submarine, do you think the submarine came up to rescue the survivors from the ship? Nothing doing. What did the submarine do? The submarine had already fired a torpedo at INS Kripan, which was a member of the same squadron of anti-submarine warfare ships that the Indian Navy had sent out. That torpedo had missed, after which the Kripan had fired a few anti-submarine mortars and warned Khukri as well. Hangor, however, went after Kirpan and fired more torpedoes at it, which missed. Once it was out of torpedoes, it sat silently. Nobody came to the aid of INS Khukri's survivors just then. That happened in the course of time. Even INS Kirpan did the sensible thing of not rushing into a rescue mission, because that would have immediately exposed it to the Pakistani submarine. War is a brutal thing. Very brutal thing. Ideally, nobody should ever have a war. But when you have a war, to accept exceptional chivalry of some era, some century, wars are always brutal. But chivalrous acts can be occasional and very exceptional. To expect that is very difficult, nearly impossible. And with this US Department of Defense, led by Pete Hegseth, you saw how he spoke, silent death, you are not safe anywhere, death will chase you, etc., etc. This is a cowboy Department of Defense. And the American armed forces have always been among the most brutal when it comes to fighting a war. So to expect any mercy from them in this case would have been unreasonable. These are all key questions. So I told you the first question, did India have any moral or legal responsibility? I've explained it to you. Legal, no. Moral, yes and no. No, because this was outside of India's EEZ, far away from India's coast. So this was really in the wide open ocean. If you look at the Indian Ocean, its name is Indian Ocean, but its size is 73 million square kilometers. That is 20% of the area, surface area of the entire Earth. It's a very vast zone of which India, if you take all of India's EEZ, including the EEZs around India's islands on both east and the west, that is Lakshadweep and the Andaman Nicobar island groups, this is about 2.3 square kilometers. India, even in terms of its EEZ, has just about 3% of the Indian Ocean. Indian Ocean is very, very large. It's more than 10,000 kilometers from north to south. It's nobody's case that just because it's called Indian Ocean, India should be able to control all of this. Nobody, no Navy, American, Chinese, Russian, American, Chinese, Russian, Indian, all put together also do not control an ocean like this. Things can happen in that wide ocean that nobody can keep an eye on, and unless you are forewarned or you are tracking something. As a matter of fact, that it's called Indian Ocean has also led to a lot of heartburn in the past. In the past, at a time when Kissinger and Nixon hated India, Kissinger once said famously or infamously, he said many things infamously, but one of the things he said infamously at a conference was, why do we call it Indian Ocean? What's Indian about this ocean? This can just be renamed the Sea of Madagascar. Even lately, we've had some issues in India as well when Americans sometimes, Trump administration came in and occasionally they said Asia Pacific, and immediately there was consternation on our side saying Asia Pacific, are they going back to the old terminology? Because for the past decade and a half, we had started using Indo-Pacific. Trump administration corrected it. That said, Indian Ocean does not mean India has control of the entire ocean. That is impossible for humans, or God forbid, even for God. I know gods are forgiving, so I can take that liberty. Even gods can't control an entire ocean, least of all an ocean the size of the Indian Ocean. The second thing that I read is, and I hear, and I see that often on social media as well, is the argument that this is our backyard. So for heaven's sake, one of the reasons India has not developed a strong enough maritime temperament since independence is simply because we have seen the seas, the ocean as our backyard. It is not our backyard. Just because it happens to be the south and east and the west and not north with the Himalayas, not on land, it doesn't make it the backyard. This is actually our front yard. Remember, those who came from land, they became a part of our country and our society. They got naturalized. But the foreign colonizers who came and left, the last colonizers who came from the sea. So seas are very important. That is not India's backyard. If anything, that's India's front yard. A little bit about the Iranian Navy. Iranian Navy is very modest, very small. Iranian Navy has 17 subsurface vessels, of which one is a Russian origin Kilo class submarine. We have some of those also. Some we are retiring. One has become a museum. One has been gifted to Myanmar. Those are on their way out or being retrofitted and renovated. Iran is one of those. Nobody knows where that one is. Another 15 plus 1. These are 16 midget submarines and they are pesky. These can be tiny submarines with 2 or 3 crewmen, in some cases 5 or 6. They are like little gorillas underwater. They are commandos underwater and they can carry out subversion. They can sink big ships by sticking limpet mines and do a fair bit of damage. We don't know where they are right now. 73 surface ships. I don't know how many survive now, of which only 4 were frigates. One is definitely gone now. One more ship of some size, that is IRIS Bushehr, is somewhere near Sri Lanka now. And Sri Lankan government says they've been seeking refuge in Sri Lanka. That means 2 of the 4 are out. There is 4 corvettes and then 20 fast attack aircraft. So it's a very small navy, most of which looks like has now been either sunk or been badly damaged, or maybe many of them are now hanging out in other parts of the world. Now, that's a question that comes to my mind also. It was a few days back that the fleet review ended, and soon enough the war started in the Gulf. So what was this ship doing after so many days in this area? So it's a possibility. I'm not saying I know anything, but it's a possibility that the ship thought, or the captain of the ship thought, that it was unsafe to go to the Gulf or to try and go home right now because that was a battle zone. It would have most certainly been sunk. It was hanging out there, hoping that it was safe that far away, more than 2,000 kilometers away, and then expecting somehow that it will reach maybe Kochi on grounds of refueling and then be there. The rules of war are actually complex, but if 2 belligerents are at war and a third country comes upon something like this, a ship, a bunch of soldiers who are either escaping or moving, that country has the power and the responsibility also to detain them and to keep them, not like prisoners, but in detention. And then there are elaborate laws on how these people will be treated. They can be given furloughs or paroles, etc. But they will be in your custody in a way. In a camp, you can declare a hotel a camp so that no belligerent benefits either from getting them back or by getting a chance of killing them or harming them. That did not happen. Maybe the ship had that expectation. Even if it had that expectation, why was it so far out south? I can only guess, it's an educated guess, that the ship thought, or the captain thought, that the further away it was, the safer it would be under the circumstances. As we know, sadly for the ship, it did not turn out that way. This ship, IRIS Dena, some people also write RINS, so that is naval ship. Dena is named after the Dena mountain range. Dena mountain range, which in Persian is also called Koh-e Dinar. This is a long mountain range in Zagros mountains in Iran, where the highest peak, Kashmastan, is 14,465 feet or 4,409 meters. This is also a ship in what is called as the Mauj class. I got a bit curious, MAUDGE, Mauj class, what is that? Until I did a little bit forensic, I lifted the layer and I said, where does it come from, Mauj? It comes from Mauj, Persian Mauj, M-O-U-J. That's the correct way of spelling it also, but it's been anglicized or Americanized or westernized in its spelling. Mauj is a wave, and that's a word that's used very often in Indian poetry, for example. Remember 1952, Shakil Badayuni's lines, "Tu Ganga ki mauj mein Jamna ka dhara." Mauj, dhara, wave, it's the same thing. Or more recent, 1972, From Shore, Ek Pyar Ka Nagma Hai, Maujon Ki Rawani Hai. Again, Mauj is wave. That is the class That is the class of this ship. It's built in Iran. They built only a couple like this. This was commissioned quite recently in 2021. That is young in the life of a naval ship. This is, however, gone now, like most of the Iranian Navy. Now, I know you might think that this is a sweeping statement that most of the Iranian Navy is sunk. So, most of the capital assets of the Iranian Navy are now sunk. They are either sunk or they are hanging out some other part of the world. Maybe one is in China someplace or close to China or Russia. I don't know where they are, where the submarine is. At the same time, Iranians have a large number of fast attack craft. Fast attack craft is midget submarines, also speedboats, which carry missiles, which carry mines, and which can play havoc in a tiny channel like the Strait of Hormuz, which at its narrowest is just about 22 miles or 35 kilometers. There, a few mines strewn here and there can cause a lot of problems, and also many of these chota boats can fire missiles and also launch Shahed drones. And remember, Iran is an unusual country. Iran has not one navy, but two navies. One is the Islamic Republic of Iran Navy, regular navy that we are talking about. The second is the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC Navy. IRGC Navy does not have any big ships or submarines, but it has quite a large number of very nifty, very nimble, and very dangerous small attack craft, which it will use and it's been using to achieve its main purpose. The main purpose is blocking the transport of oil and gas from the Middle East to the rest of the world.